was that I would get to see my French family in France. And so this 2 weeks ago, I guess I just got back about a week. Jet lag, whatever. I got back a little while ago, and here I am. And I just thought that I would just share a couple of my own observations about travel. Because all of us in this room are travelers, we're spiritual travelers. And I think that there's a lot of things on any journey that, whether it's a journey in this plane of existence or a journey that's spiritual, there's always some good pieces of advice. And as Annette was saying, as we do our reflecting, we think of things that can help us along the way. So the first thing that I'd like to point out about any kind of travel, which I've been very blessed, even when I was a little kid. Well, I started out in mainland China anyway, so I've always been a traveler in one way or another. And so I've been blessed many times to get on board a train or a boat or whatever and be traveling. The first thing that I think of when I think of traveling and getting ready to travel is that week before you go. And you are trying to get everything done, okay? Because you are going to have control of everything. Not only that, you have a to-do list, but on top of that, I even added in, well, I'll get my car license renewed too before I go, and I'll get it. You even throw in extra things because you know that you're highly motivated. And then I keep lists, and I update my travel list after every trip as to what did I bring, what should I have left behind, and so on and so forth. And my ideal, which I never get to, is that the day before I leave, I'll already have everything done. And then there is this wonderful, wonderful moment that comes. You're on the plane, and you hear, bang, the door has closed. Thank God. There's not one more thing I can do, and if I don't have it, I'll buy it. Just that great sigh of relief. You know, the illusion of control is gone. So on one hand, there is when that plane door closes, that's it. That's all we can do. Now we just have to go forward with the adventure. And the big thing that takes is trust. Trust. Because once that door is closed, we are zooming into something we have no idea, really. We sort of know that we'll be at such and such, we'll catch such and such a plane, and we'll do this and we'll do that, and we'll go to such and such a restaurant. The plans we make, but it may change, and so we have to be very open and very, very flexible. But we need to trust that no matter what happens, we have the divine guidance, the consciousness, the imagination, the creativity, all of God's gifts that we will be able to handle whatever comes up. And when we have that trust, then the trip becomes so much easier. We landed, I looked at the plane ticket that my daughter had bought on Delta Airlines, I guess it was. And I looked at it. Now, I have been over to France, this is probably my 10th or 11th time. And I'll explain why it's been so many times later on. But I looked at this ticket, and we were going to land at Charles de Gaulle Airport at like 6 in the morning, and then we had another flight at 7 from the, now Charles de Gaulle is probably one of the world's biggest airports. And there's entire airports, like there's one for international travel, but then there's a completely different section for local travel. We had 1 hour. I just looked at that ticket and I thought, oh boy. And I'm one of those people, I have no pride. I'm 80 years old, I'm taking advantage of it, I have 2 hip replacements, you zip me through that airport in a wheelchair. And you go through all these subterranean places and secret elevators that you didn't even know existed in an airport, and they whip you through, and my daughter's trundling along after me. And we got We got to the other terminal, and there were so many people taking advantage of the fact that now in all airports, they have transportation for people with hip replacements and so on and so forth. There are so many of us that, of course, there was a long line. So, of course, we got to the right gate just as they're closing the doors. But you know, all we had to do is go over to customer service. They put us on the next plane. Maybe we had to wait for another 40 minutes or something like that. And there's two ways we could have gone through that. We could have gone through that saying, why did the airplane or the airline even give us such a small window to change planes? That's absolutely ridiculous. You know, We could have gone. Instead, we just laughed and went and got the problem fixed. And that's just such a great way of looking at life too, you know. We can complain and shake our fist at God or whatever that we think is to blame, or we can just move ahead and solve the problem and go on. That's what spiritual maturity is really all about. I think spiritual maturity is knowing where we can control things and when we have to just let go and trust that things are going to be okay. I love this particular quote, which Reverend Candy once gave me. It's from Einstein. It says, "The most important decision we make is whether we believe we live in a friendly or hostile universe."
Yes.
And really, if we're spiritual beings, that's got to be our belief. That's got to be our bottom line belief. No matter what situation we are in, we need to trust that we are going to be provided with all the tools, with the imagination, with the creativity that we need to solve whatever problem comes up. So, we finally landed in France. I got to spend half a week anyway. My daughters both working, so of course this had to be exactly 7 days. If it was me, a little longer. But we spent about 3 or 4 days down on the French Riviera, in Cannes, with my French son, who is my adopted. So I have an adopted French family. It all started with Parkway North High School 40 years ago. And since that time, us and the parents and the children have all gone back and forth many, many, many times, which is why I've been so blessed to be able to visit France so many, many times. One of my favorite parts of this entire trip was that I got to go on the Très Grande Vitesse, TVG. Does anybody know what that is? It is a high-speed, 120-mile-an-hour train that you get on in the French Riviera in Nice or Cannes, and 4 hours later, you are up in Paris, across the whole country. And, oh, what a beautiful ride it is. It just glides along, and it's so quiet, and people even talk quietly when they're on there. There's no loud people, it's just quiet. To me, going on any kind of a train is the gracious way to travel, because you're just smoothly going along. There's no bumps, no loud people. Sometimes there's a baby, but in general. Okay. Now, I love clothes. And I love to, when I was a little girl, I did paper dolls, and I designed my own clothes for my paper dolls. And when I went to school, I really was thinking of being a clothes designer or a stylist and all this kind of thing. So I've always loved clothes. And usually when in doubt, just throw in more clothes. The only problem is, whatever you take with you, you are going to be dragging around with you everywhere you go. Well, of course, we know the spiritual lesson from this. It's when we are dragging around the past, the things that didn't go right, the people who didn't do right by us, all of that kind of stuff, it slows our growth down. So it's important to pack light and to stay in the present moment. And I think that's the most beautiful thing really about the Mindful Spiritual Center. It is that we practice, our goal, even though we're imperfect and we're human beings, our goal is to be in the present moment and to be the best we can, because every little tiny thing we do that's kind and that's loving. I love the song that we heard so far today about love. Everything that we do has an effect on the rest of the universe. And even though we are a small group, we are a powerful group. And we are so blessed to be here and to have all these different speakers and beautiful music and all of these different things, because they give us new ways of looking at life and maybe the ability to let go a little bit of that stuff and leave it behind and not rent out space to it in our heads anymore, so that we can be open to all of the blessings and all the new possibilities that we are surrounded with. But if we're dragging all that stuff with us, we can't see them. So that's another piece of travel advice. Travel light. So even I, who am a peacock and love clothes, when I'm traveling, it's a uniform. God forbid I might even wear the same thing 2 days in a row. And only 2 pairs of shoes. One that you're wearing, and it's really stripping it down. But again, if you're going to be whipping through airports and dragging, you could, in fact, when you're in Paris, especially, we usually stay in an apartment or something in Paris rather than a hotel. At 6 o'clock in the morning, you can hear rumpity, 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 because it's the people who are heading out to the airport dragging their suitcases behind. Because everybody has to go get out to the airport by about 9 o'clock, and you're going to catch a flight back to the United States anyway. All right, so another spiritual lesson about travel, whether we're spiritually traveling or physically traveling, is simply being open to change and just being open to new things. I think that for a lot of us, it's very easy to get into sort of a rut. Every day it's the same thing. We get up, we have our same cup of coffee, we read the same things in the newspaper, we go to work, or we do whatever we do, and then the next day it's exactly the same. And we're not necessarily, how do I say, our brains love to have that comfort of sameness, and yet we've been gifted by God with imagination and creativity. That's what Reverend Laurel was talking about last week. We've got these gifts and they need to be expressed. And the only way they can be expressed is if we're open to new things. And a little story that I can share with you about being open to new things is that my daughter Amy and I decided one afternoon when we were in Cannes that we wanted to take an extra little side trip, and we were just down the street from, well, technically speaking, 40 minutes away from Monaco. And I've never been to Monaco either, and it's, of course, that's where Grace Kelly was. And I've just seen beautiful pictures of all these giant, cruise boats that are there and all this kind of thing. So let's go to Monaco. After all, it's only 40 minutes. So we get on the auto route, which is like a turnpike, and we have either I don't know whether it was Apple Maps or Google Maps, but we're just going to follow along and take the exit, period. So we're going along, and all of a sudden it says, take this exit. Well, it's not even an exit. It's just a little secondary road, and there's no, welcome to Monaco, here you are. Just on this little note. Well, that must be just a secondary road, and being from the United States, they'll probably be, the next exit will be city center, and we'll take the next exit. So we cruise along, and we cruise along a little more, and a little more, and a little more, and we are in Italy. Now, there's auto routes, there are, in Germany it's the Autobahn, and in France it's the auto route, and they're, supposed to be express, and they are express between cities. However, if you get off of one, you must remember that they are all built into a country that was thousands of years old before the United States even came into being. So all the roads are little pig paths. So you get off the auto route, and then you go around this way, and around again, and then you cross over, and then you go around and up and down, and then you have to take a left-hand turn and a right-hand turn, and finally, it's not a little clover leaf. Well, of course, we missed Monaco. we did take a little second. We did see it from a distance. Coming back, we saw it. Oh, there it is. And we just said, you know what? This just gives us an excuse to come back. Next time, we will go to Monaco. So, what was the cause of this problem? It was my assumption, being an American, that the roads would have big signs and turnoffs just like we do in the United States. That was my mistake. And I said, well, it's just a little road. It doesn't even say, here's Monaco. And so we missed our turnoff. We missed the whole thing. And how often we miss opportunities because we think that Spirit, the universe, God, is going to present things in a certain way that we're expecting. It's important to stay open. And I think that's one of the greatest joys of travel, is that suddenly you are plunged out of your little safe little space where everything's predictable, and there's all kinds of new things to see and new experiences to have. And quite frankly, it is not necessary to get on a plane and go to France to have that experience. When is the last time any of us have been, I'm sure there's some people who have, but not all of us probably could think of, maybe it was a year ago, 2 years, maybe even longer, since we've been to a farmer's market. And the farmer's market is such an extraordinary place. There's all those fruits and vegetables and interesting things and people selling interesting things and people that you can talk to and all of this kind of thing. There are so many places to go. I heard that there's a lavender farm in the state of Missouri. Did you know that? There is a lavender farm. Does anybody know where it is? I've heard of it.
There's one like down 55 kind of towards St. Genevieve.
Okay.
But there's another one somewhere out west.
Yes, there's someplace up to the northwest. Yes, yes. I mean, there's all kinds of new places and new things. You can take a train. I just heard this. You can take a train from Kirkwood to Washington, I think it's Washington, Missouri. Spend the day there and come back and be a voyager. I mean, there's so many interesting and fun things to do. But if we just keep on doing our same old routine because that's the way we've always done it, we don't get to have those fresh new experiences, and we don't have that opportunity to sort of change perspective about life in general, about where we are, what we're doing. And just like Annette was saying, one of the values of travel, whether we just take a different way home today, or whether we're crossing the Atlantic Ocean, one of the advantages is just that time to reflect. That time to get perspective on where we are and where we want to go. And that is so important when it comes to spiritual growth. Absolutely, as far as I'm concerned anyway. Okay, and then finally, the reason that I went on this trip was to see my family, the Chappelles, who 40 years ago, we figured it out exactly to the day. My daughter Katie went over through a program at Parkway North over there to visit the Chappelles, and their daughter's name was Cecile. And at that time, Mr. and Mrs. Chappelle weren't sure that they wanted to send their daughter to the United States. But when they met my daughter, they said, oh, she must come from a decent family, so I guess it's okay. And since that time, the parents have gone back and forth, all the children have gone back and forth multiple times. Because of that, my daughter Katie ended up spending a year in France as a student. And for me, it's just been a blessing all these different times that I've been able to go over there and been able to also welcome them. Here's an interesting thing. When we go over to Europe, we want to see these castles and all these ancient things. What does everybody want, at least in the Chappelle family, what does everybody want to go to? Graceland. Graceland is the place. The whole works, the whole works. And I have to say, I grew up, I can remember, I went to a private girls' school, and I remember when Elvis was really popular, and one of our class members almost got kicked out of school because she was the president of the Elvis Presley fan club, and actually went to Ed Sullivan's show and all that. So anyway, the greatest gift, I think, the greatest gift spiritually about any kind of travel, and whether it's travel abroad or just going through the spiritual journey that we are all on, the greatest gift, the greatest gift that we have is the gift of loving each other. There is a study done, and I think I've mentioned this study before, if they were trying to predict, who gets to live the longest and most healthy lives and all this kind of stuff. And they said, is it because they exercise more? Is it because their weight is the right weight and their BMI and all of that? Is it because they drink coffee or they don't drink coffee, or they smoke or they don't smoke? The top two reasons, number one was, if a person has family and friends, a core group of people, that was a big predictor. But the biggest one of all, they called social integration, which means, how many people do you talk to that you don't know on an average day, an average week? Do you talk to the people in the elevator? Do you talk and share with the people in the grocery line? Do you share some of yourself and interact with others? That is the greatest thing that you can do, not only for your own health, but to be an expression of love. I think one of the saddest things is now everybody wants to have not only things their own way, but expects everybody else to bow to their own way and agree with exactly how they want to do things. Embrace the differences. Embrace just the presence of other people, because the greatest thing is love. So in closing, there's just one thing that we can do as spiritual travelers for each other's right now, and that is just to take to the person, look at the person next to you, look in their eyes and say, I'm so glad you are here.